Hey, good morning, everyone. Let me know if you can hear me. Welcome to Notion Office Hours. Just, yeah, let me know if you can hear me. I know last time there was like a bit of an audio delay, so just let me know in the chat. Perfect. Okay,
Perfect.
perfect.
Good.
Welcome, welcome. Let us know where you're coming in from. I see Germany, UK. I love hearing where people are coming in from because these episodes bring in a pretty global audience.
That's
Canada,
pretty cool.
Phoenix. Awesome. Cool. So I'm here with Nick True today. I'm super excited. Nick is a finance YouTuber, and I actually went down the rabbit hole and was binge watching many of his videos last year. So also works with his partner, and so he's going to walk us through his business cycle planning. But Nick, I'd love for you to kind of give a bit of a context for your business too, because I think your business model and your whole business is
Sure.
pretty interesting.
Yeah. So, like Marie said, I work with my wife Hannah, and we both work together. We obviously live together, but we also live in an RV full time and travel normally. Right now, with the sort of the pandemic going on, we have very stationary, and we're sort of camped out near family. But um, our business model is we create YouTube content as sort of the top line of how people interact with us, and it's all centered around budgeting and managing your money. And then we make a little bit of money from YouTube advertising and then affiliate revenue. So we have a couple of software tools and a few other things that we will promote. And if you use our links, then we get kickback. So we get those two things. And then our main income, though, actually comes from one-on-one coaching. So people who want to budget, need help with it, and don't know exactly how to make it work for them, they'll hire me directly, and we'll just do hourly coaching. And then we also run group classes that are not they're not DIY. They're more like a college class.
Mm.
So you have a 5-week class that's we teach on Monday night. We do office hours on Thursday night, homework due on Sunday, and we'll run that for 5 weeks. Everything centered around budgeting and managing your money. And but YouTube sort of drives awareness about all those things. So that's kind of
Amazing.
our business model in a nutshell.
Very cool. If anyone has any specific questions for Nick along the way too, use the ask a question area at the bottom. And also, again, related to the setup, if as Nick is demonstrating his Notion setup, if something comes up and you want to have him elaborate on something, definitely use that ask a question area so that it doesn't get lost. Otherwise, you're obviously welcome to chat. And there's a couple polls down there too, because it's always fun to see, are people total beginners into Notion? Are they intermediate? Seems like the majority of people here are intermediate users, which is great. And it sounds like a lot of folks have been to a past office hours, so
Cool.
most
That's
people are
great.
pretty familiar with the format. So Prescott asked, how do you get people to actually do their homework, asking for a
Asking for a
professor
friend.
friend?
Yeah. So, one thing that's nice about these classes is that even more so than college, I'm not working with people whose parents made them go. So that
Ooh.
automatically helps me because
Well,
most
imagine they're
people,
incentivized with the budget. It's like
yes,
there's a
yes,
pain
I
there.
need
Yeah.
to. But then also we do incentivize them further. In the second week of the class, I incentivize them with $100 Amazon gift card. So if anybody who completes all the homework, the last week we'll do a drawing of those names, and they'll get a
Yeah.
$100 Amazon gift card, which is good for people who need to budget. That makes a difference. So
Awesome. And most people said they don't want to say pro because they never know. Yeah, I mean
yeah,
there are like advanced users, and then there's also Notion pros, and there was sort of like I guess like an inside circle, if you will. And so Notion will often send us swag, and so if we ever run live events, which we're not doing anymore, Notion kind of gives us extra resources and things like that to make sure that we have what we need to kind of run events and explain Notion to people and work with folks, share our wisdom and knowledge and whatnot. So. Yes, I am a Notion Pro. Well, why don't we dive in and you can give us a
yeah,
bit of let's tour through your setup. And then again, if people have questions, we can always adjust them as we go, but I will focus in on your screen and let's dive in.
sure. All right. So can everybody kind of see what's going on here?
I can see it.
Perfect. Yeah, I love Peter McKinnon. He's one of my favorites. Okay, so I gave you a little bit of context about how the business works, mostly just so you understand why we do some of what we do in our setup and how that may differ from what you're doing. I did want to also say, and I can make this this sort of agenda public if it's helpful. But these are sort of the influences that are going to drive everything that you see today. I really love the guys over at Basecamp, and their book Shape Up for how they do their planning has been a really big influence on the way we do our planning. I went through Michael Hyatt's book Best Year Ever probably 2 years ago, and that definitely has some residual carryover. I read through the book The 12-Week Year. I really like a lot of it, but you'll see as we get in here why I've shifted from 12-week cycles to even shorter cycles. And then we use OKRs as our goal setting system. And then, of course, I've consumed a ridiculous amount of Marie's videos for how we actually set things up in Notion. So, it's mostly just I'm interested in productivity and all this stuff. And so I've read a bunch of stuff, and we sort of cobbled together a system that works really well for me and my wife. So hopefully maybe that makes sense. Okay. So I want to start at a really high level and just explain our overall Notion structure. So over here, if you've watched any of Marie's stuff, you probably are familiar with this para term. We don't follow everything in the para, but we've taken a few things out of it that we really like, areas being one of them. So over here in our workspace, we have areas, and everything is just quickly divided up to access for planning stuff, operations for us, which is 2 different CRM type databases. And one is for customers, and then one is for more colleagues or people that I want to make sure I'm continuing our relationship building with. We have a content marketing, which is all of our production. So like I said earlier, we put out YouTube videos, but we've just launched 2 podcasts about a week ago. And then we also have a database for our newsletter. And we'll add to this over time as we sort of need to. If you've watched Thomas Frank's office hours, Thomas Frank was a big influence for how we set up our YouTube calendar and our database over on that side.
In the chat, folks are mentioning the screen looks a little bit pixelated. Is there
does
anything we can do about that? I'm not sure if it's
let me make sure I've got everything closed over here. Got a couple of options for internet if I need to swap over. Okay.
Oh, they're
still there.
It got a little better. Looked like it kind of focused a little bit. Not excited, but the screen is 1/3, so the share is small. Looks better. People said they can read the side, but yeah, that looks a lot better.
Okay,
that looks good. Is that okay for folks? Can you read that a lot better now? I think that looks
better. I can read the sidebar now. Okay.
Yeah, it looks much better. Okay, perfect.
Okay, good, cool. All right, so let's go back to areas. So I won't spend a lot of time here. I just want to show you sort of our high level setup. There's areas. Then let's go back to, I need to just open this up. And so I have that. Okay. So that's our areas. We have our resources page. Not too terribly much interesting there. Just a couple of things for us to keep track of. Notes when we're learning and reading, and then a few systems and processes. And
so you both keep the things you're learning together in the same database?
We do. We keep everything in the same database, and then we'll use a couple of views and filters to show
like who's reading what.
Who's reading what, that's right. And so like for me, I have mine, and then Hannah has hers, but we keep it all in the same database. Okay, so is the quality still bad?
It does seem to
okay,
dropped out a little bit, yeah.
Let me swap over and see if this internet is any better.
Everybody's using the internet right now.
I know,
in the meantime, someone asked a question about the pros. I was just going to say, I think there's maybe 50, 60 pros out there.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a Slack group with a bunch of those in there. So, I mean, they're all over the world, right? So there's lots of different people kind of representing different countries and different cities.
Okay. I've swapped over to a different internet. Is this any better?
It doesn't seem to be.
Jeez.
Just have to make do, I guess. I mean, it can still read it. It's just a little pixelated.
It's screening. Okay. I'm sorry, y'all. I don't know why. I'm gonna close everything out. I've got pretty much everything closed.
Yeah, Ben was saying your video itself is very, very crisp, but it's just the
it's the screen share.
Yeah.
Okay. I wonder if I
share the app instead of sharing the browser, or
we could do that. Oh, I can see now that I'm looking at it, I can see how it's a little pixelated. All right, y'all. Hang in there.
Resolution or something. A great question did come in from Homesick Mac about maybe I'll read it and you can always address it at some point during the chat. But he said, I'd be grateful for some tips when someone has 2 or 3 different businesses that sometimes overlap in planning and execution. Sprints can also overlap because of deadlines that we can't control or plan. So I hope this makes sense. I think that's interesting too, how you do sprint planning if you do have multiple businesses. And I don't know if that applies to you, Nick, but maybe you might have some thoughts on that as we
go through. I can talk a little bit about that. I don't have multiple businesses, but similar to you, Marie, I have client work and then I have Mapped Out Money work. And so I do think about them slightly differently. I'm going to see if I can share a different screen and share the app and see if it gets any better.
Okay. Thanks for being patient, folks.
Okay, so if I say that, share. Okay. It's not, okay. Let's just share my whole screen and see if that makes it better. Okay. Better on that end.
Seems better so far. Yeah, that seems a lot better.
Okay. So let me go back here and we'll get into the meat of this. All right. So we've got areas and we've got resources. Now let's talk about kind of the meat of where kind of the main purpose of today is business cycle planning. So similar to 12-week year or the book Shape Up, the sort of main idea is that humans are not very good at estimating how much can be done in a year or 3 or 4 years. So you should have a vision for the future, but doing detailed yearly planning can be somewhat difficult, especially for small business owners when so much changes so quickly. We've tried to do yearly planning in the past, and we found ourselves at the end of a year not anywhere close to what we started with. Yeah. And not even from a metric standpoint, just from things changed. We launched a different product, something didn't work, so we shifted. And when I found, especially when you're small in business, you've got to be nimble. And so for us, we started breaking down our planning into planning more often and smaller chunks, right? And so the book Shape Up, they talk a lot about how Basecamp works in 6-week cycles. And we found that to be a good amount for us. So let me show you my cycles database over here.
What I love about that too is they're so strict on those 6 weeks, right? It's if they can't get a project done in 6 weeks, it's over.
That's right. That's right. And now, keep in mind, we don't have that many in here because we just started using Notion this year, 2020. Oh, so we're still fairly new to Notion, but oh my gosh, it has been it's been a lifesaver for us. We moved over. We tried a bunch of different things over the past few years, and Notion has been really good for us. My wife and I also, we name our cycles based on, we always do a buddy read book each cycle. So we'll both read the same book and then it gives us something to talk. It's like binging a Netflix show.
I love that.
Reading. And so we read Song of Achilles in the first cycle, and now we're reading some Sherlock Holmes short stories. So that's what we name our cycles. All right. So let's talk about the way these actually work. So I'm going to walk you through like our actual cycle, and then I can show you how some of the differences change as well. So this cycle page becomes sort of a hub for us. And Marie, by the way, when I'm on this app, I can't see anything in Crowdcast. So if you have any questions, just jump in.
All good.
So the cycle page is sort of it's our hub. It's what we refer back to all the time. It's what we sort of live out of during any given cycle. And up top is just our mission for the company, our top values for our company, and then our OKRs for this cycle, which I can get into. But when we first are doing our planning, none of this is here. It's all templated. And what we do is we come all the way down here to our planning agenda. And this is what I want to walk you through. So the way that we do our cycles is very similar to Basecamp, where we have a 6-week cycle. And then in between, we'll take a couple of weeks to do two things. Number one, it's sort of maintenance catch-up work, which for us ends up being a lot of content production. And then it also is time for us to do planning for the next cycle. And so during a cycle, I'm not spending a whole lot of time thinking about the next one. Instead, we do that during the 2-week sort of cool down period. So here's the 5 sections we go through. And typically we try to carve out at least a couple of days to really go through this in detail. And we don't always do it, but ideally, we try to do this at least a few times a year where we will actually go somewhere, go rent out a cabin, or we do it always at the beginning of the year. But it's for us, we found it's been nice to get out of our normal pattern and go to an Airbnb or something like that, and really
Wouldn't that be nice?
It'd be nice to do it right now.
Yeah.
So
That's
I don't know that
great.
we'll be doing that for next cycle, but we did it earlier this year and it was nice.
I really like that actually, because my husband and I have been doing 2-week cycles, and I'm kind of curious. I know he loves the Shape Up book as well, but I like 6 weeks. I think that's an interesting amount of time, and actually taking more than just like 2 hours on a Sunday to map everything out. I like the idea of letting it percolate a little bit over a couple of days.
Yeah. And that's because we've had multiple times where we'll do planning, on a Monday all day, first day or whatever, and then we'll sleep on it and we'll wake up the next day and like not totally change it, but we'll be like, now that we're kind of slept on that, let's change up a couple of things. So it's been nice to have that couple of day period for us, for sure. Because we're married, we also do some personal life planning during that time as well. We don't necessarily do that every 12 weeks or 6 weeks. But if we do a trip like that, we'll always take one day just to talk about our personal life and sort of life planning as well. So that's the other benefit to going away and doing it. Okay. So we just
someone was asking if I can ask you to make your Notion full screen.
My Notion is as big as I can get it.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Like it's filling my screen, so I don't know if like Crowdcast kind of adapts depending on how big your screen is. So I'm not sure if there's any other way around that. The screen share.
Is it just so now I'm back over here? Yeah. Okay.
So well, those black borders around the screen that will depend on your browser window. But Ben did recommend to change the resolution. He said the resolution is huge. If you can change it to a smaller resolution, it might.
Okay.
Your whole screen resolution. Yeah. Jessica also said she had to actually leave the webinar, refresh it to come back, and it
got better.
Display kind of improved.
Okay.
Ben says preferences display scaled.
For Notion?
Is that for his whole, like his monitor, Ben, or?
Because I'm just sharing my entire screen, not the application. Maybe that's the problem.
Apple system preferences. Let's see if we can figure this out.
I'm sorry, y'all.
No, it's okay. It's tough. Everyone's got a different different setup, different screen res, and also again, like I've just noticed, there is just that extra lagginess right now with Zoom, with Crowdcast, with all sorts of tools right now. I think there's just a lot happening. Scaled. We'll get there, people.
Is that any better?
That looks a lot better.
Is that? Okay.
Does that look better for other folks? That's like way more. Yes, we did it.
Okay. All right.
Go
cool.
team. Okay, sorry, continue.
All good. So for our planning, we have a handful of sections that we go through, and we spend a good bit of time on each one. So for us, section 1 is just a review. All right. And so we go through a handful of questions. What went well during the last cycle? What were our previous cycle OKRs? And for anyone who doesn't know, that's just the way we set goals. So you could just replace that word with goals, but it's your objective, your key result, and kind of how those work together. And it's just the way that we set goals. I'll talk about that more when I share our goals for this cycle. We talk about what didn't go well. Then we have this little nice note here to encourage us that because we have a lot of things that don't go well. We try to bite off a lot sometimes, and it doesn't always work. Then the initiatives. So this is like the actual projects that we pursued, and we go over those. And then any recurring themes, good or bad. And then this is the main purpose of section 1, which is what are we actually going to implement going forward. And so to give you a couple of ideas, our last cycle, you can see right out of the gate, first one was using Notion for us, and we had switched from Trello, and it was a big improvement. Here were our OKRs, and we did not do a good job at them. Let's see, what didn't go well? We didn't meet regularly, which sounds insane because we live in an RV, we're married, we have no kids. You would think that we could fit that in. And we both just have a habit of getting in our silos and sort of putting our head down. So we've been talking a lot about that. These were the initiatives. So each one, just the projects that we focused on, and we would just quickly write down whether we failed. But again, these were the main purposes of section 1. What are the recurring themes, good or bad, that we saw? And then what are we going to do because of it? And a lot of ours have to do with batching and productivity for the last couple of cycles, because it's a big focus of what we're trying to do right now, is find systems to batch our content and get more productive with our content instead of just sort of floating day to day to day. You'll see like this note here, for example, I do a lot of one-on-one budget coaching, and I previously was letting people basically book times whenever. And so now one of the big changes we made in our second cycle this year is I only do coaching on Mondays and Wednesdays, which frees up my Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays for either batching or other sort of catch-up-y type work. So this is why this section has been so important to us, so that we can actually learn from our failures as we go and then implement it going forward. All right. Section 2 is just a quick review of our overall like company mission and vision. I haven't got the vision into Notion yet. It's still in a Google Drive document. But like I said earlier, here's like our core mission and our values with the company. I'm going to get the vision in here for next time so that we can always review it and just say, do we still feel like this is what it is? 99% of the time, that doesn't change. But every now and again, we'll tweak something based on something that's happened. Section 3 is that we will actually set our key objectives for the next cycle. And the reason that we have this section right here is because these OKRs should directly correlate. The goals we're focused on should directly correlate to the vision of where we want the company to go, where we want to be in that year to 5 years from now. So we still talk about yearly planning and where we're going. We just don't set hardcore goals. Like the company has to make X amount of dollars this year, or we need to have this many customers this year. We don't really do it that way. We'll have a higher level vision, and then we will say, okay, what's the objective for the next 6 weeks that pushes us towards that bigger vision. And since we've just finished reviewing the last cycle and what didn't go well and how we can improve, and we've now reviewed our high level vision, it becomes fairly not easy, but it becomes pretty straightforward to say, okay, what's the next 6 weeks look like? What should we focus on in the next 6 weeks? And this becomes a longer conversation, right? We'll brainstorm a bunch of things. Sometimes we'll, do that right here. Sometimes we'll do it on a pencil and piece of paper as we just talk it out. And we will both try to settle on something that makes sense, that we both have buy-in to, that we feel like does align with our vision. And we will put those here. So here you can see our objectives for this current cycle. One is more about productivity, so making our individual days more successful. And I'll show you what this actually looks like on our week over here. Our objective second one is to become more efficient with our content. Rather than filming a YouTube video on Thursday, editing it on Thursday night and putting it out on Friday, which is what we have been doing. Actually, taking and scripting 4 videos at a time. And then, a couple days later, filming 4 videos in one whole day and just trying to get better with that. And we've already seen a major improvement over the last couple of weeks for us, which has been exciting. The last one is to further diversify our income streams. So right now, about 70% of our revenue is coaching and classes. And we would like to have some products that are more like one time. So the one we're going to be doing this cycle is I'm going to have a YNAB related ebook, which YNAB is like Notion for budgeting. It's like an awesome budgeting tool that I talk a lot about on my channel. And we're gonna make it like a handbook for it of sorts, and then probably launch that at the end of this cycle.
Yeah, I mean, your profit first videos were the most useful thing that I found when I was like trying to figure out like how do I actually implement this in practice. If anyone's not familiar with that book, Profit First, any small business owners, it's such a fantastic book for basically business budgeting. Right?
Totally, it's huge. It's huge for us. We weren't doing anything like that for a long time, and then when we got on that system a couple of years ago, it's been a big deal for us. So, big fan.
All that to say, you could do like a profit first related product, and I was
totally.
Like, you could totally sell that.
No, I want to, for sure. That's one of the things we can talk about, sort of what we're doing differently, because right in the middle of this cycle, the world kind of, went aflame, which is crazy, and with the pandemic and everything. So what we're doing differently, one of them is to make a pivot towards doing more profit first type things. So any questions about the first 3 sections so far? Sort of what we do here. We feel good on that?
That's great. Yeah. I always just love kind of seeing other people's process and what's working for you, and makes me want to go tweak our sprint planning.
So the next section, sections 3 and 4 are really the big ones for the planning. So the next section, this is verbiage. Sorry, this is verbiage straight up out of Shape Up, as this idea of making a bet on a project, which I'm a big fan of that language for them. And basically, they just talk about how making a bet has a different connotation, because it builds into the project this inherent idea of you are having to risk something. You're risking time on this project, right? So if we make a bet, we all know that, we're probably risking something. And when you do a project for your business, you're risking time. And so it just has a different connotation, but it also it also has this built-in, hey, it may not work. We could bet wrong, which is also more, reality of what happens.
Right.
So we bet on our initiatives, and our initiative is what are the projects we're going to pursue. And we have different varying amounts of initiatives each time. Sometimes we have a lot if they're all very small and can be completed quickly. And sometimes we have just a couple that are really going to take the majority of the 6 weeks to get done. So again, we'll sort of brainstorm a big list of potential initiatives. We'll talk about them. And then we will pick the chosen ones that we feel like would be the most relevant to align us with our key objectives, and also align us with our vision of where we're going. because of the type of business we run, we also have some things that we're just always going to be doing unless something drastic changes. So for us, every 6 weeks, we're not sort of discussing, should we be making YouTube videos? That's sort of a macro level thing that we've decided is important for our business that we're going to be doing for the foreseeable future. So it's just always sort of known we're going to be doing content. Now, inside of this section, we have a database here called Shaping Work, which is another, language from that book, Shape Up. And this is something that I tend to lead during the 2-week maintenance period in between cycles. So I'll spend some time before Hannah and I come together to shape some projects. I kind of take the lead on this. And then during our planning, we will talk about this. So for each shaped initiative, before we even decide whether or not we're going to pursue it, we have to map it out with all these sort of things. And these are templates that I threw in here for this one yesterday. But they'll all show up over on the cycle page and I'll show you. So we use this database. Like if I'm just sort of going about our cycle during our normal time and we have, there's an idea. We should look at that for possibly doing next cycle. So like this, building a dashboard for analytics. I came up with this idea last week. I was like, I'm really struggling to see all the analytics for our business. What if we built a one place to have a dashboard for it, or looked at tools that could do that for us? Let's talk about that during planning for cycle 3. So I just threw it onto this database. And then during the 2-week cooldown period, I'll come in here and I'll actually start filling in all of these to try and to help us decide whether or not this is worth our time during cycle 3 or if it should be put off. So when I go back to...
Oh yeah, I think the back doesn't work when you're like, it's kind of a funny.
Okay. It's all good. Okay. So then again, we have a conversation all about, great, what do we feel like we can do? Here's some of the ones that we ended up choosing for this cycle 2. And then section 5 doesn't really have anything. It's just a checklist of like at this, at the end of planning, we should have a list of initiatives for the next cycle, fully shaped. We should have our OKRs for the cycle, and we should have our weekly deliverables. So we go through this planning, then we take all this information and we put it up here into our sort of cycle dashboard, which is, like I was showing you earlier, sort of our hub. So the way this is broken down is that at any point in the cycle, we can see all of our initiatives right here, and we can see weekly deadlines. You can see we're not doing very good on that YNAB ebook. A lot of this because of the coronavirus and everything that's going on. I'm going to blast it out hardcore probably next week to try and catch up. But everything else is going okay so far. So like I was showing you, the initiatives, this is where we really flesh things out. So shaping the initiative, this is where we answer, okay, why? What's the problem we're trying to solve with this? Well, we produce YouTube videos weekly because Mapped Out Money needs to gain the attention of our audience, and we do that through content marketing on YouTube. Great. How many videos do we think we want to produce? What's our appetite for this project? 6 weeks, we want to do at least 7 videos. We map out a little bit of if we're going to be changing up our YouTube strategy, how we're searching for videos. Rabbit holes, this is where sort of thinking through like, where can we get stuck? Where can we potentially spend way too much time and make this project go off the rails? For us, there's a fine line between me scripting a video and then getting super fancy with like filming versus just putting out a video that's going to be helpful for people.
Yes. Yes. If I edited my videos, they would never get published. So I'm like, screw it, just ship it.
Be done. So, and then, we go back and forth on the amount of videos we want to produce a week. And sometimes for this cycle anyways, we've said we're not going, like an area that is a no-go is we're not going to put out 2 videos a week. We'd like to eventually get to that place. But right now, this is an area where we've said we're not doing this for the cycle so that we can make sure and execute against these other initiatives. The last thing we do is we go ahead during our planning and we will put down some preliminary scopes. So what you're seeing here is the tasks database that I got the idea from Marie on that.
Master task
And
database.
yes, and it is set with a specific view for the initiative YouTube Weekly for this cycle. And so we will map out just a handful of tasks that we know need to happen for this. And then when we assign them and set a due date to them, they'll show up on our individual sort of pages over here that I can talk about in a second. So each one of these initiatives has that. This cycle, we're producing a YouTube video weekly. We're launching our podcast. We're launching a second podcast. We're making a YNAB ebook. We have a class launch. There's actually not a ton of work to do this because this will be our 5th time launching the class. So we have a really good system there, but it will get launched this cycle. And then we're rebuilding the coaching page and sort of the way I do that. But yeah, go ahead, Marie.
One, how do you have enough time for one podcast, let alone 2? I'm curious what the second podcast is.
Okay, so the first podcast is a normal podcast. It's me and Hannah. It's longer form, 30 to 45 minutes. Same kind of content that we talk about on YouTube, but just longer and having both of our perspectives all the time. Whereas on YouTube, like 75% of the time, it's just me, and then Hannah joins me every now and again. The second podcast, I should have explained, this is actually not that hard for us because we've already been doing something similar. So for the past 2 years, I've been doing daily money tips on Alexa, the Amazon Echo. So I have just a daily sort of like literally 30 to 90 seconds financial tip. And it's only on Alexa right now. And so we're just doing the work this cycle to sync all that up and actually get that into podcast form as well. Really so cool. I'll just basically continue what I've been doing, which is a couple times a month, batch recording a bunch of daily, money tips and then scheduling them out.
That's awesome.
But we've been wanting to get into podcast format for a while and just haven't. We have one client still that I do contract work with called FinCon. And so this sort of gets into the question earlier of how do you do multiple businesses? I don't know that I'm super helpful on this one, but we basically just include all the work that I do with FinCon as an initiative each cycle. So what are the things that have to get done for FinCon? And we just map it out as if it's one of our other initiatives that we need to execute against, if that makes sense.
So it sounds like your initiatives are kind of like maybe how I treat projects. Is that?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Cool.
Yep, that's exactly right.
I think that's a really simple explanation. Yeah, just like include it when you're doing your sprint planning. Like it would be sort of like all the things I'm responsible for, regardless of their due dates in a way.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. The last little section of our cycle hub is this weekly deadline. We try not to let this get too filled up, but if there's any specific deadline, like the date we're launching a podcast or did we produce a video for that week, we will just put our weekly cycle or our weeks right in here for the cycle and just kind of keep track of when we've hit high level deadlines. All these deadlines are in the database, the task database that's inside the cycle. But this gives us a quick view when we're like kind of going, oh my gosh, I'm stressed. Like, where are we at again? What's going on? It's like, okay, you can always just click, click on the cycle, look at our weekly deadlines. Here's the big stuff we've committed to for the cycle. Then we can go, oh yeah, we got to get that, done. This trailer had to go out this week. So I need to get that done, kind of thing.
Awesome. There's a question that popped up that may or may not, like maybe you're going to cover it afterwards, but I figure I can bring it up and then you can fit it in. But Hamza was asking, how do you copy the whole template from one cycle to the next?
So I have a template. I'll go here to my cycles database. So I have a template that anytime I'm going to make a change to the way we do our cycle, I try and edit the template first. I don't always do that, but I try to because then I have to go back and change it.
Exactly.
So I have just a template right here. So anytime we create a new cycle, I'll use my template. And basically it just has all the right spots with these little bitty brackets telling me what I need to do in each area. Our weekly deadlines, and then our blank agenda which has the questions, and again, sort of just insert here. So whenever we do a cycle 3, we'll just use this template. And I can make this public, by the way, if y'all would, if that's helpful.
Oh, if you're open to sharing it, I know people always appreciate those templates, so we can definitely add it to the call to action. Here. That's amazing. Thank you. Amazing.
So that's kind of the way we do it. And sometimes we don't have this many initiatives. So if we don't, we just, just highlight it and delete it for that cycle. If we just have like a couple. Does that answer the question as far as how we kind of attack that?
Yeah. So Hamza, let me know if that was clear. But basically, whenever you have a database created, in the top right-hand side, you can either go new or you can say new template, and you can decide in there to activate a template. So templates are so powerful because you can also have like templates inside of templates inside of templates. And also one thing that I've been experimenting with recently that may or may not help you is global blocks in Notion. There's a little bit of a hack to do this, but like for your things like your vision and whatever that never change, you can actually have one page that has all of like our vision, our values, whatever, and that can be a global block that you embed in your database template. So if you change it in the original, it actually will change it here. Blew my mind. I'm only just learning about this in the last couple of weeks. So we can do a whole...
would be nice. I was gonna say that would be nice because right now, if the mission, like if we change any of this stuff, we have to go and like change the template. So that would be slick. Global blocks. Okay, yep. I'll take a look at that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think William has a little video on that, so you can
awesome.
Google global blocks. Yeah,
I definitely will do that.
Awesome.
So any more questions on the cycle? The last thing I wanted to share is sort of what we do on a week-to-week basis. But any questions on this page? We feel good on that?
There was only one question I had when you linked to your database. I don't know if it was like inside the initiative, and then you linked to, was it your sprints? There was a page that you...
Oh, the shaping work?
Maybe, yeah. Here. And I was just curious why you didn't embed the shaping database versus making you like have to click into it and then go back. I was just curious if there was a reason that you did that on purpose.
No, my reasoning is mostly just because I don't like, I don't know, maybe
didn't want to like fill it too much.
Yeah, I just don't want to fill it too much. Like it's just simply like a more of an aesthetic thing. I also tend, anytime I'm in Notion, I tend to have like 2 or 3 tabs of Notion open at the same time. And so like I would open this up in one tab and then leave it over here and go back and forth rather than all in one place. But that, I don't know, that's just like a...
Yeah, no, that's what's the beauty of Notion, right? You get to decide.
Little bitty, like OCD
I'm like, you could
thing.
tuck that into a toggle and have your database embedded. Sorry, I should do that. Stop.
I should do that. See, look.
Too nerdy. Yep. There we go. And of course, you don't have to do that. I was just curious if there was a reason.
There's not. Oh, that's not it.
Oh, and Hamza did say that template isn't public yet. So just something to, you might have to change the status to make it available to duplicate.
Okay. Oh, okay. I can read, duplicate.
Cool. Thank you, sir.
All right. See if that works. All right. Let me know if that works. Okay. So the last thing I wanted to share was what we do on a week-to-week basis.
Okay.
So my wife and I both have a separate database for our weekly agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And we then favorite whatever week we're currently in. And ours both look different. So mine looks like this here. I keep, again, our mission and our values right at the top because I always want to be reminded of what's going on. We have our cycle OKRs. So I'll just copy and paste whatever we decide on for the cycle right up here. I also have any habits I'm currently working on and then books we're currently reading. And I also have these linked up to like the learning database so that I can go right there where I keep extensive notes as I'm reading a book so that I can actually try and implement something as I'm doing it. I tend to read a lot of things at once and slowly
Mhm.
finish them, rather than like just one and done.
Yep.
Tends to be how I do it.
Me too.
Okay, so this right up here is all my kind of personal stuff. You can see I've been really doing not a good job on working out this week. It's been a tough week,
Here, here.
weird one. Um, but I just have a couple things I want to execute against each day, and then we have two embedded databases. So one for personal tasks. So it's still the master task. It just has the tag of personal, and assignee is Nick. So I just have a couple of things in here I want to get done this week. And then this is the thing I really live and die by. So every day, the thing I'm paying the most attention to is this week page and the cycle page. And the week page is our master task database, but specifically filtered for the stuff I care about. Hannah has hers filtered a little differently.
Mhm.
So for me, I keep my done over here, and when it's done, it doesn't show up anymore in this view. The due today is the main view that I look at. And the main things I use are this priority and the win the day. I get a little ambitious, and so each night before I go to bed the next day, I'll check all my due dates and sort of lay out what I want to get done the next day. I almost never get everything done, which isn't maybe great, but I have to get the win the day stuff done
That's
in
cool.
order for me to have a successful day.
Oh, I was going to ask you, like, what defines a successful day? I love
Yep.
that.
And so each night I try not to never let myself ever get more than 5 win the days, but I try to keep it in the 3 if I can.
Mhm.
And so I have to get this stuff done, and then I can have a successful day. And then if I get anything else done, then it's just bonus. That's kind of the way I look at it.
Love that.
The initiatives over here, if there's a specific task that ties in with a specific initiative, then it shows up here. A lot of the time it should, like that one just got wrong. That actually should have that on it. Tags, I don't really use them outside of client work or partnerships. So right now I do some client work, like I said, with FinCon, and then I also have a partnership with a friend's company where I do coaching for his customers. And so anything related to that, I'll put his company there. And that's pretty much it. I'll be honest, my week setup was a lot more complicated like 4 weeks ago, and I just wasn't. I don't know. I just got too crazy with it, and I
Yeah.
wasn't
It's got to be
using it.
usable. Yeah.
And so I went back and really simplified the amount of stuff I've got in my task database that I care about, and it's been way better the last few weeks. The last thing on this page is at the end of each week, I have just a little bitty checklist here of like my weekly review. So did I finish my personal stuff? Did I create a new week in the agenda database? I need to check on cycle status, just sort of get a bird's eye view. Where are we at? Are we on track? Do I need to move some tasks from last week to this week? What do we need to do to make sure that we actually ship everything by the end of the cycle? This is my like kind of favorite motivational quote, I guess. So I keep it right there. And then I have quick links for things that I access a lot right here on my weekly so that I can quickly hit those if I need to.
So how much time do you spend between your weekly agenda and then the actual cycle sprint? Do you kind of like bounce back and forth between the two on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I
Or
mean, I would say 75, 80, 85% of my time is right here on this weekly page, unless I'm referencing something or need to grab some information somewhere. But then at least once a day for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, I do go over to the cycle to sort of check in on where we're at with our tasks and if I need to adjust anything. And I also find for me, like I can get so into the weeds with stuff that then I'm like, oh my gosh, where are we at? And so that's
what was
when
the
I
point of
go,
all of this?
yes, that's
Yeah.
when I go back to the cycle and
Mm,
sort of go, okay, yes, this is what we're doing. There's a few tasks. I did that this morning and I was like, oh man, I've got to, do like 3 more things this weekend before Monday because of what we sort of said we had to get done. So,
right.
and I kind of forgot about them or didn't see them. So I would say, 90% of my days here, but
Mhm.
I use this for reference regularly. And then during that 2 week period in between cycles, we spend a lot of time prepping for the next one. So
I really like that approach, and just wanted to comment on something that you said earlier. Was just that I think a lot of new people to Notion feel like they want to get it right first, and they
Yep.
almost want to plan the space in advance. And I think you really cannot know until you've used it. And you can download all the people's templates in the world, but it's only once you're kind of grinding it out and figuring it out, inevitably it's going to change. So I always encourage people, like, give yourself permission to play a little bit. It'll take you some time to find just the right amount of information that is
Yes.
usable and helpful for you. Yeah, you'll never be done with your workspace, as Danny said, exactly. And I think, I know a lot of people ask about that. They're like, oh, but don't you feel like that's the danger of Notion, that you're going to be, yeah, it's true. Like, that is a possibility that you end up kind of tinkering and doing stuff that isn't actually moving your business
Totally.
forward. But I think once you find that approach that works for you, and you've got the template set up, and it's like, ding, 1 second, you've spun up all of these
Yes.
properties, that moment where it all clicks and comes together will fast track your output. But it does take a bit of a time to get there, I'm sure, as you've seen.
Oh,
So
yeah. Yeah, I definitely would echo everything you just said. It took us a little bit to get ramped up and really figure out a system that would work, and we've tweaked very little, or we've tweaked a little more in the weeks right after that. And then now I feel like, we come up with a very minor tweak every couple of weeks, but we feel like we've hit a good stride with it. And it's really, really increased. It's definitely increased our productivity compared to what we were doing. So I echo every bit of that.
And Danny in the chat said, I haven't seen any, formulas in your workspace, any specific reason. I was thinking about that recently. Like, I don't actually use a ton of formulas. I have a couple in my tasks and templates, but unless you're actually working with numbers, it's not necessarily sort
It's
of a
not.
must-have, or it can be over-engineering or overkill. I think it makes sense for, certain scenarios and for certain people, but unless it's really functionally helping you, where it's like, oh, we've got 80% of our time, it seems like you're already very aware of what you're producing.
Totally.
You don't actually need those formulas. So I'm curious, yeah.
So the only place we really use it, and this is not at all what we're talking about today, but but the only place we use it is my wife and I. Like I said, we live in an RV. We travel full time. We actually are very close to our family. So one of the ways that we will use, this is the only place we really use formulas right now, is we keep all of our travel plans, especially as we've like booked something versus like not booked something. All this is very up in the air now because of the coronavirus. But the thing that we track is days and weeks away from family. So we'll toggle every trip, whether it's near family or away from family, because we do care deeply about how much time we're spending near our extended family. So we track all that, and we try to keep a close eye, and we try not to be, we try to never go more than 3 months, 3 or 4 months without seeing family. It's kind of our rule of thumb. So that's really the only place we use it, though.
That's cool. Yeah, if it's not helping you or advancing your space in any way, I think there's so much you can do in Notion without even touching formulas and rollups. One of the main ways that I use rollups, for example, is I track everything on a daily basis, and then I love to roll up that information into my weekly agenda. So at the top of my week, it becomes like a report, and I can see, what did I read this week? What were all my gratitude? What were
That's
my wins
nice.
of the week? And it's just kind of a neat, like, as the week goes on, it gets filled out a little bit more, and I like that. But I don't think that's necessary. There's so many different ways you can make your space work for you. Someone asked about, I'd like to know if Marie's still using the tagging method that she showed in a past video, how it developed, how many tags there are, and why using both the tag name and the same tag in a select column. Yes, I'm still using a master tag database. It's like I think it's one of the best things that you can do in your Notion workspace. Let's see how many I have here. I have 159 tags in my space.
Gosh.
But I didn't build that in advance. Like, that just evolves as you go. I'll add a new book to my thing. I'm like, oh, that's related to like economy, and I just kind of add things as I go. And then over time, those tags are connected to books I'm reading, people I'm following, notes and ideas that I'm taking. And so that has grown organically, like a little brain, sort of like Roam Research, where I can very quickly, if I'm pulling a blog post together, I can kind of jump around and collect that information very quickly. So highly recommend that to connect it to your kind of core databases. Hope that helps. So I think you covered the sprint planning across different projects, which I think is really great. Like you've already given me so many ideas of ways I want to tweak our sprint planning for
Oh,
sure.
cool.
And then Adam asked, I'm brand new to Notion from Evernote. I'm curious how many workspaces you recommend. I can imagine one for all my stuff, just using pages and tags to manage as much as 3 for personal, coaching, career, creative career thoughts.
Like an actual like Notion workspace.
Well, on the left-hand side, you've got like Hannah, Nick, areas, cycles, resources.
These. Got it. Okay, I'm with you.
I'm assuming that's what
Is
you.
that
what you
yeah.
mean.
Okay, because I was gonna say everything right now is just under mapped out, like our mapped out money, like account.
One central
But
workspace.
yeah, but that could change if we start adding more team members to our company over time, then that might change. I might pull some of the personal stuff out and either do it as a private page or create a Notion workspace for just me and Hannah to keep personal stuff. As far as these over here, again, if you're coming from Evernote, I guess my advice would be similar to what you said, Marie, whereas like I would get, if you're just talking about these workspace pages and things you're keeping over here, just throw as many as you want to in there for now, or start out, but you're probably going to change it over time and just be comfortable changing, because we started out with way more than this. And then we were like, oh, that doesn't need to be there. And we exit or throw it into something else. I don't know. What do you think, Marie, on that?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends, but I like to keep all my stuff integrated. Like I don't necessarily think of the different parts of my business as being separate. So in a single day, I might touch 3 different pieces. Like if you're talking about creative career,
Totally.
coaching, you're going to touch all of that stuff. And so I think it's all got to be pretty accessible pretty quickly. And so similar to you, the master tag database, you're going to have their tasks database, you're going to have stuff in there that is going to be associated with different parts of your business. So I think, Adam, I would probably recommend maybe checking out, I have the video on using the para method with Notion. I think could be a good starting point, even if you kind of take it and run with it and use it in a different way, just like Nick did. I think it's a good starting point. And also because Evernote it's different than Notion. In Evernote, everything it's kind of like a filing folder on your Mac where it's like the data lives in one place. In Notion, your data doesn't really have to live in one place. Yes, there is like a source, but you can pull that information in so many different ways, and you can kind of decide what that looks like. You can create dashboards, like you could create a personal dashboard for yourself as well as your like creative career dashboard, but they could all be pulling tasks and different things from different parts of your life and workspace. So I feel like Notion's a tool that it actually makes you think differently about the way you access information. So you don't have to think of things as like, oh, that needs to live in a different space or a different page. So I know it's a lot when you're first getting started, but I do think the para method could just kind of give you a starting point for maybe how to organize that.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly how we started, and then we tweaked from there. I think that's perfect.
Florin asked about the structure and approach for taking notes from books. I know, so last week we did have a whole office hours on resource hubs, and I do cover that, but I'd love to hear, Nick, if you have a specific approach when you're reading a book, are you taking notes as you go? What does that look like for you?
So for me, I read on both physical books, but a lot of Kindle for us because we are traveling full time. So it's just easier. But for me, again, my wife and I have a little bit different system, but it's very similar. So anytime I come up with a book I want to read, I throw it down in here to my one day. And then this is what I'm currently reading. And then this is what I've completed or what I'm sort of working on. What I do is as I go, here's Shape Up, actually a great example. So as I'm reading, I found for me that if I just take notes in the margins or highlight things and then try to do the summary all at once at the end, it's way too much work and I'll procrastinate on it. So now what I do is, as I'm going, once I finish up a section, not necessarily each chapter, but once I finish a couple of chapters, before I let myself read more in that book, I have to come in here and take notes on those chapters. Here's the way that I do it. So, or maybe my template would actually be easier to look at.
Be awesome. Yeah.
So the way that I do it is all this stuff at the top, it's very similar to my cycle. The stuff at the top is what I fill in last. Um, Down here is where I do the work. So all I do is I do an intro, or I just have a key ideas and summary. So I just take bullet points on each chapter. So I take all my bullet points, I flip through my book, look at notes I've taken in the margins, look at things I've underlined, reread things I've underlined, look at things I've highlighted if it's on the Kindle. I'll write down any notes from those. And then for each chapter, I write down a one or two sentence takeaway, main point of the chapter that I want to walk away with. I do that for each chapter. Then when I do finish the book, I spend a little bit of time looking at all of those. And I come up here to, here's the things I'm going to actually do because of the book. If I had to summarize the whole book in one sentence, here's what it would be. And here's some overall key concepts. But this one right here is the main thing. So I'll go and show you the one I did for Shape Up, because that drove a lot of what you saw today. So you'll see down here is all of the key ideas. Right. So I have my takeaways. I have any ideas. And so I can quickly scroll through here and just see, oh, chapter 2, main takeaway from chapter 2. Chapter 3, main takeaway for chapter 3. Again, I actually don't use a lot of this once it's done, because the main purpose of doing this for me is so that I can create this. Here's what I'm going to do. Number 1, we're going to focus on shipping. I explained that. Number 2, we're going to shape work before we execute against it. We're not going to say, yeah, let's do that project without really thinking about what that entails, which is what we were doing. Here's a few other things. And then one sentence summary of the whole book. So this is how I do it. It's actually based, I was like a very studious person in college, and I came up with a system for how I would study for tests and things. A lot of this is based on what I did then.
That's
but
great.
it drives us to actually doing something with the books that we read. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's what we do.
I think that's massively helpful. I'd be curious to hear from those of you in the sidebar. If, do other people have book habits like that? I know in the past I've just, you're like powering through books and looking at book summaries, and you're just kind of like churning through information. But then when you ask yourself, like, well, what am I actually taking away? You sort of have like a general gist, but not the actual takeaway. So I love how actively you're applying that stuff to, here's what that looks like in my, how to take smart notes is a great resource there. It feels very meta to be like, I have a Notion note of the book, How to Take Smart Notes, and I'll be taking notes on it. But thank you for sharing that template too. What I'll do is after this session, I'll update the Sprint Cycle CTA, the call to action at the bottom, with a couple. I know you've mentioned a couple different templates in there. And so we'll just make sure that they're all batched there. We'll include them with this session. But I love that. And I mean, I don't know if other people have questions about like other parts of your workspace, but I really
can answer whatever.
Love how intentional everything is really planned out there. And I think we covered Homesick Mac's question too. So I don't know what your time is like. I know I
can hang around a little more if we got more questions.
Minutes.
So yeah.
So if anyone else wants to see other parts of Nick's setup, or I can clarify anything in my setup, I love. Again, I'm already like getting ideas of it. Ooh, I can like improve my weekly agenda. I love it. We love picking your brain. Yeah, it's fun, right? And I love seeing other people's workspaces because you see like their brain in action. You get to see how other people think and what matters to them. And daily journal. Do you do a daily journal? That's a great
I do, but I actually don't keep it in Notion. I'm a physical journal kind of guy. So that's the one thing. I'm super digital for most things, but that's one thing that so I have just a little bitty notepad. It's actually like big enough, small enough to keep in my back pocket. And I do a small little, like literally, I don't know, it's not Notion related, but maybe it's interesting. My process each morning is I just write down a couple of things I'm grateful for. I write down a couple of things that I'm working on affirmation wise. So a couple of affirmations I'm trying to more internalize. And then maybe the most interesting part of my journaling is I got an idea from James Altucher years ago about brainstorming ideas. And so every morning I come up with 10 ideas, and they could be about anything. Some are about business, some are about personal life. The point is not to come up with ideas that you will use. The point is to work out your idea generating muscle.
Mm,
So I don't really do much with the ideas. Sometimes I, throw them away. I don't go back and look at them. The point is I'm going to force myself to come up with 10 ideas about X. And I found that ever since I started doing that, whenever I do need to brainstorm for the business or for our life, like in a real situation, I'm way better at coming up with ideas now
yeah,
because I work out that muscle every day.
I love that.
So that's my little process, but I don't do anything in Notion with it.
Interesting. No, I love that. I think the journal for me is the one thing that kind of got me in there regularly all the time.
Really? That's all.
Yeah, yeah. Like I've tried for years and years to have a journaling habit, but I think something about the way it looks in Notion, little emojis, drop downs, like it just becomes this little template that you can fill in really quickly, and a photo of the day every day as well. And then when you see it over time with this like grid that appears of all these photos, and it's almost like a summary of your life. And I find it really interesting that the more you use it, the more it gives you data, looking at, again, like moods and wins compared to like what I'm reading at the time. And I can start to see like, oh, I can look at patterns of like whenever I've had a crazy productive week that's like 5 stars, I almost always have a crash week after that's really unproductive. So I'm like, so what if I like designed for that, knowing that if I have like a really intense week that's like I'm in flow and everything's amazing, if I know that I'm going to have a bit of a low week after that, I can be a little more compassionate with myself and give myself that permission. So I just find it's been such a powerful tool for reflection. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you're making me think like, man, should I be? I
Like,
do.
should I?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that I definitely like that idea though, of being able to have the data. I mean, that's why my business is about budgeting and managing money, because I like the data, So.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people have asked too, like, oh, do you have any like financial, templates and things in Notion? But like, there's very little that we do money wise in Notion. And I'm curious, as a YNAB user, it's not necessarily the best tool. It's not the easiest way to add info. So the only way we really use it is for tracking our, and not even tracking, but what are the expenses that we have in our business that are yearly, monthly, one-time recurring, Canadian versus US. And it's just like a snapshot of like, oh, here's what we can predict throughout the year. But we're not like, oh, this week I spent 1803 on whatever. Like we're not really tracking it in that way, because I think YNAB's a much better tool for that.
Totally. Yeah, I don't do anything finance in Notion other than some of our goals are finance related. Like my wife and I are saving money for a down payment on a rental property, but that's like save dollars for that. But that's under our goals. That's really it though. Everything else finance is elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah, it'd be interesting. I definitely need to record some updated how I'm using my journal today and how I'm using my weekly agenda today.
I'd like to see that.
April said she's finally created a kick-ass financial process in Notion.
Oh, cool.
It'd be cool to see kind of how you're using it. Yeah.
I'd love to see that.
Very cool. Well, I mean, I know I'm going to want to connect with you after, Nick, as well, but I'd love to maybe grab any of those templates. I can grab those and we'll update that sprint cycle to have just kind of a summary of all those different templates that you so generously shared. So those are amazing. Does anyone else have any questions for Nick, or things that you want to know, or resources we can share with you? It's really fun. I really love, again, seeing behind the scenes of kind of what's been working for you. And I know that you're still kind of a new Notion user, so I feel like you're going to be taking it to a whole new level.
Very new.
So awesome. Thanks, Sarah. I know Danny asked about habit tracking. Did we cover any of that, or do you track any of your habits in your?
Other than this right here, which I probably should use a roll up on it. I don't do anything fancy. You'd probably find much better stuff elsewhere for that. I do this right here, and then at the end of the week, I will just manually, like I said, I could probably get fancier with a roll up. I just manually go like, okay, looks like I read 5 days, great.
Cool.
5, and then I can look at my weekly agenda database and sort of see there. I'm going to be reading Atomic Habits by James Clear next. It's up next on my reading list. So I imagine after I read that, I will probably build something more sophisticated.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, we had somebody asking what's the best place to find you? I assume it's your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you type in Nick True on YouTube, you'll find me.
very cool. You're active on Twitter as well,
I am
right?
active on Twitter, yeah.
Cool.
And then, so those are the main two hubs.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited. I want to chat with you about the global blocks and
Yeah, I would love to see that.
online courses and all that stuff. So
Totally.
super fun. Thank you so much for your generosity and sharing those templates and for showing us around your space. It was super fun. I hope that everyone found this really useful, and super grateful to you, Nick.
Yep.
Thanks for coming.
So let me know. Let me know if anybody needs anything. Reach out if you want something.
Yeah, Patrick shared the link to your YouTube channel there in the sidebar. So yeah, definitely check out Nick's content. Super great. I was so impressed by your Profit First videos. So thank you for coming. Thank you, everybody. And next week we have August Bradley. I know some of you have mentioned, I don't know if you followed his YouTube videos, but he's got some pretty high quality kind of how he applies Para to his workspace. And so we're going to have him next week. So thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody. And Nick, I'll be in touch.
All right. Bye.
Thanks,
See y'all
everyone.
later.